She showed kindness to a customer and got fired for it. But the very next day, she walked back in as the boss. Megan never went looking for trouble. Never had. She wasn't the type to make waves or pick fights. To her, it was simple: show up, do the job, and treat people with respect. That's how she was raised. Work hard, respect others, and when things got messy, keep your head down. But sometimes doing the right thing had consequences. And Megan? She was about to learn that the hard way. For nearly 3 years, Lancaster Grill had been her second home. Nothing fancy, just a small diner tucked between a gas station and a laundromat on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. A place where truckers stopped for coffee, families gathered for Sunday breakfast, and the waitstaff memorized your order before they even knew your name. The hours were long, the pay wasn't great, and management barely cared. But Megan stuck with it. She had bills to pay, rent that was already too high for a one-bedroom. And her younger brother, Evan? He was in his second year of college. He had no idea Megan helped cover his books, his groceries, whenever their mom couldn't. She never told him, just sent a little extra whenever she could. That's why she pulled double shifts. Why she put up with customers who wouldn't even look her in the eye. Why she ignored coworkers who acted like kindness was a weakness. She had seen things here that made her stomach turn. The way Beth, a senior waitress, flat out ignored some customers while laughing and flirting with others. How Jason, a newer server, avoided certain tables altogether. How the energy in the restaurant shifted, depending on who walked through that door. It wasn't just about money. A well-dressed businessman got smiles conversation. A working-class guy in a paint-stained uniform? Rush service. And if someone looked like they might not tip well, some of the staff wouldn't even try. Megan hated it. But calling it out? Not an option. She had learned that the hard way. A few months ago, she made a simple comment, just a casual remark about how a table had been waiting too long while Beth scrolled through her phone. Beth didn't even blink, just looked her dead in the eye and said, "You don't get paid extra for being a saint, Megan." That's how it was. Either you went along with it, or you learned to keep your mouth shut. Megan had chosen the latter. Until that night. And after that, nothing was ever the same. The dinner rush had come and gone. A slow Wednesday evening, the kind Megan didn't mind. Fewer customers meant fewer complaints, fewer spills, fewer fake smiles from coworkers who only turned on the charm when it suited them. She was at the counter, refilling sugar dispensers, when the bell above the door jingled. An older black man walked in. His clothes? Clean but worn. Nothing flashy. Just a simple button-up and slacks. He carried himself with quiet confidence, but there was something in his posture. The way he scanned the room for just a second before stepping forward. Megan recognized that hesitation. She had seen it before. And sure enough, the response was instant. Beth didn't even glance up from her phone. Jason looked right at the man, made eye contact for half a second, then went right back to joking with another server. No greeting. No. Welcome to Lancaster Grill. Just silence. Megan felt it. That heavy, uncomfortable weight in the air. This wasn't an accident. Her coworkers had made a choice. For a second, she considered keeping her head down. Just staying out of it. It would be easier. It always was. But then, she glanced at the man again. The way he stood there, waiting. Like he was giving them a chance to prove him wrong. Just this once. So Megan made a choice too. She wiped her hands, grabbed a menu, and walked straight over. "Evening, sir," she said, voice warm but casual. "Just you tonight?" The man met her eyes. Something in his expression softened. "Yes, ma'am." Megan smiled. "Follow me." "You okay with the booth?" "Perfectly fine." She handed him the menu, pulled a pen from behind her ear. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" "Coffee," he said. "Black." Megan nodded. Coming right up. She moved quickly, grabbing a fresh pot, pouring his cup herself. She could feel Beth watching her. Could feel Jason's eyes, too. But she didn't turn around. As she set the cup in front of him, the man glanced around the restaurant, then back at her. "You the only one working tonight?" His voice was low, just for her to hear. Megan knew what he meant. She flicked her gaze toward the others, Beth, whispering something to Jason, both barely even trying to hide their smirks. "Feels like it sometimes," she said. That made him chuckle. He flipped open the menu. "What's good here?" She tilted her head. "Depends. If you want something solid, the pot roast is fresh. But my personal favorite? The grilled salmon." He raised an eyebrow. "That's so?" She nodded. "Promise you won't regret it." He smiled. "Small, but real. Salmon it is." Megan jotted it down. "Great choice." As she walked back to the kitchen, she heard Beth mutter, just loud enough to be heard, "She's wasting her time." Megan clenched her jaw, but kept walking. By the time she placed the order and returned with a fresh coffee refill, she could feel the shift. Subtle, but there. The way Beth's eyes narrowed. The way Jason kept glancing toward the booth, like he was waiting for Megan to slip up. Even Tom, the manager, had peeked out from his office, scanning the room before disappearing again. Megan had the sinking feeling she had just put a target on her back. And she wouldn't realize how bad it was until the next morning. She barely slept that night. Something about the way Beth had whispered, the way Jason had smirked, the way Tom had watched, gave her a bad feeling. But she told herself she was overthinking. She had done nothing wrong. So why did her stomach twist as she pulled into the parking lot? She stepped inside, expecting the usual. Beth and Jason chatting, the kitchen crew prepping, the radio humming low in the background. But something was off. Beth, smiling. Jason, arms crossed, silent. And then creak. Tom, standing in the office doorway, looking at her like he'd been waiting. "Megan," he said flatly, "come with me." A cold pit settled in her stomach. She followed him inside. And then, "We're letting you go." It hit like a slap. Megan blinked. "What?" Tom leaned back in his chair. "It's not working out." Her heart pounded. "Not working out? I've been here 3 years. Never missed a shift. It's a decision we've made." And Megan knew what that meant. Her throat tightened. "This is because of last night, isn't it?" Tom didn't answer. He didn't have to. Megan clenched her fists, untied her apron, set it down. And as she walked out, Beth smirked. Jason? Smug. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming next. Because the next morning, Megan walked back through that door as the boss. Today, she was stepping back in with the one thing Beth, Jason, and Tom never imagined she would have. Power. Megan inhaled deeply, squared her shoulders, and pushed open the door. The scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, just like always. Customers were scattered in their usual booths, forks clinking against plates, conversations blending into the steady hum of the radio. For a moment, nothing seemed different. Then Beth turned from the counter, saw her, and froze. Jason, mid-laugh with the busboy, caught sight of her too. His mouth snapped shut mid-sentence. A flicker of something, confusion, unease, crossed his face. It was almost too perfect. Megan let the silence stretch just long enough for them to squirm before striding toward the counter, setting her bag down with purpose. Beth was the first to recover, scoffing as she crossed her arms. "What the hell are you doing here?" Megan tilted her head slightly. "You'll find out soon enough." Beth's smirk faltered. Before she could fire back, a door creaked open at the back of the restaurant. Tom stepped out from his office, already looking irritated, flipping through a stack of papers. "Beth, I need you to." Then he saw Megan. His entire body went rigid. His eyes darted from Beth to Jason, like he was trying to calculate what was happening. "Megan." His voice was slow, careful. "You don't work here anymore." Megan smiled. But this time, there was no warmth behind it. "Actually," she said smoothly, "I do." Tom blinked. "What?" Before she could answer, another voice cut through the tension. "I believe I can clarify that." Every head in the room turned. Richard Lawson walked in, calm and collected as ever, his hands tucked casually into the pockets of his tailored coat. He took his time scanning the restaurant before settling his gaze on Tom. Beth's face drained of color. Jason looked like he wished he could disappear. Tom opened his mouth. then closed it. Richard stopped beside Megan and turned to the staff. His voice was steady, measured, but carried a weight that demanded attention. As of this morning, Lancaster Grill has undergone some management changes. His eyes flicked back to Tom. Effective immediately, your position is terminated. Beth gasped. Jason looked like he had been punched in the gut. Tom's face turned an ugly shade of red. Wait a damn minute. No. Richard's tone sharpened. I've already heard enough from you. Tom's mouth snapped shut. Megan almost felt bad. Almost. Richard turned back to the staff, his expression unreadable. Some of you may be wondering what's going on. Let me make it simple. He let the silence hang before continuing. Last night, I visited this restaurant as a regular customer. His words landed heavy. A shift rippled through the room. And what I witnessed was unacceptable. Nobody dared to speak. Richard gestured toward Megan. This woman was the only employee who treated me with respect. The only one who did her job the way it should be done. He turned back to the rest of the staff. His expression hardened. The rest of you? Some of you ignored me completely. Some of you made it clear you had no